There are places in this world where silence doesn't mean peace, where the absence of sound becomes a presence of its own, heavy and suffocating, pressing against your chest until you can barely breathe. Ember Creek, Montana, is one of those places. Nestled deep in the Bitterroot Mountains, this forgotten town sits like a scar on the landscape, a wound that never quite healed. Population 312, or at least, that's what the faded sign at the town's edge claims. The truth is, nobody's bothered to update it in 15 years. In winter, Ember Creek becomes a prison of ice and snow, cut off from the outside world for months at a time. The frozen Ember River runs through its heart like a vein of glass, and beneath its surface, something waits. This is a story about secrets, about the things we bury, hoping they'll stay buried. But in Ember Creek, nothing stays buried forever. Before we continue, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your country or city in the comments below. And if you're ready for more dark, twisted stories like this one, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. Now let's begin. The cold came early to Ember Creek in the winter of 2024. By mid-November, temperatures had already plummeted to 15 degrees below zero, and the Ember River had frozen solid, its surface smooth as polished marble. Sheriff Cole Brennan stood on the riverbank, his breath forming thick clouds in the frigid air. He was 43 years old, with graying temples and the kind of weathered face that came from too many Montana winters and too little sleep. His brown deputy jacket was zipped to his throat, but the cold still found its way through, settling into his bones like an old ache. Next to him stood Deputy Maya Chen, 28, sharp-eyed and observant in a way that sometimes made Cole uncomfortable. She'd moved to Ember Creek 2 years ago from Seattle, looking for a quieter life after burning out in the city's police force. What she'd found instead was a different kind of darkness, the rural kind that festered in isolation and small-town secrets. They were staring at a hole in the ice, not a natural hole. This one had been cut, deliberately, the edges too clean and precise. The hole was roughly 6 feet long and 3 feet wide, just large enough for a person. Dark water lapped at the edges, black as oil in the early morning light. "How long do you think it's been here?" Maya asked, her voice tight. Cole crouched down, examining the ice around the hole. "Not long, maybe a day, 2 at most. Any longer and it would have started to freeze over again, even with temperatures like this." "You think someone fell through?" "I think someone was put through." Cole stood, his knees creaking in protest. He was too old for this, too tired for whatever fresh nightmare had arrived in his town. "Call it in, get the dive team from Missoula, and wake up Doc Harrison. If we're pulling a body out of this river, I want him ready." Maya pulled out her radio, but before she could make the call, a voice cut through the morning air. "Sheriff! Sheriff Brennan!" They turned to see a figure running toward them across the frozen field, stumbling through the snow. It was Peter Novak, the owner of Ember Creek's only gas station, a wiry man in his 50s with a perpetual nervous energy. His face was pale, his eyes wide with panic. "Peter, slow down," Cole called out, moving to meet him. "What's wrong?" Peter doubled over, gasping for breath, white vapor pouring from his mouth. It's Sarah. Sarah Kellerman. She didn't come home last night. Her husband Jim just came by the station, frantic. He said she went out for a walk yesterday evening around 6. Said she needed to clear her head. She never came back." Cole felt something cold settle in his stomach, and it had nothing to do with the weather. Sarah Kellerman, 34 years old, elementary school teacher, married to Jim Kellerman for 8 years, no kids. Cole knew them both, had gone to high school with Jim back when Ember Creek High still had enough students to field a football team. He looked back at the hole in the ice, then at Maya. Her expression mirrored his own dread. "Get that dive team here now," he said quietly, "and tell them to hurry." The Ember Creek Community Center served as the town's unofficial gathering place, a squat brick building that hosted everything from town hall meetings to bingo nights. By noon, it was packed with worried residents, their voices creating a low murmur of anxiety that filled the room like static. Cole stood at the front, Maya beside him, facing a sea of familiar faces. He'd known most of these people his entire life, had gone to school with their children, attended their weddings and funerals, shared beers at the Rusty Nail Tavern on Friday nights. They trusted him. They looked to him for answers. He didn't have any to give them. "Folks, please settle down," Cole said, raising his hands. The murmur died to a whisper. "I know you're all worried. I know rumors are flying. So let me give you the facts as we know them." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Sarah Kellerman was reported missing this morning. She was last seen yesterday evening, around 6 p.m., leaving her house for a walk. We've found evidence at the river, a disturbance in the ice, and we're investigating it as we speak. The dive team from Missoula is en route. Evidence, a voice called out from the crowd. It was Marcus Webb, the owner of the town's hardware store, a barrel-chested man with a red face and a combative attitude. Just say it, Cole. You found a hole in the ice. You think she drowned? We don't know anything yet, Marcus, Maya interjected, her voice firm but calm. We're exploring all possibilities. All possibilities? Marcus scoffed. In case you haven't noticed, Deputy, this is Ember Creek. Nothing happens here. If Sarah's missing and there's a hole in the ice, it doesn't take a genius to put two and two together. Marcus has a point, said Eleanor Vance, the town librarian, a thin woman in her 60s with silver hair pulled back in a severe bun. Her voice was softer, but there was an edge to it. But what I want to know is how that hole got there. Sarah was a good swimmer. She grew up here, knew that river like the back of her hand. She wouldn't have just wandered out onto the ice, especially not at night. Cole felt the room's attention sharpen, focusing on him like a blade. He'd been hoping to avoid this question, at least until they knew more, but there was no escaping it now. The hole appears to have been cut deliberately, he admitted. We're treating this as a potential crime scene. The room erupted. Voices overlapped, some angry, some frightened, all demanding answers. Cole let them vent for a moment before raising his hands again. Listen to me, he said, his voice cutting through the chaos. I understand your fear. I share it. But right now we need to stay calm and focused. If anyone saw Sarah yesterday evening, if anyone noticed anything unusual, anything at all, I need you to come forward. Maya and I will be taking statements after this meeting. What about Jim? Someone called out. It was Rachel Torres, the postmaster, a plump woman with kind eyes and a reputation for knowing everyone's business. How's he holding up? Jim's at home with his brother, Cole said. He's doing as well as can be expected. Please, give the family their privacy right now. As the meeting began to break up, people clustering in small groups to whisper and speculate, Cole felt a hand on his arm. He turned to find Eleanor Vance standing beside him, her gray eyes sharp and penetrating. Sheriff, might I have a word? She asked quietly. In private. Cole glanced at Maya, who nodded and moved to start taking statements. He followed Eleanor to a quiet corner of the center, away from the crowd. What is it, Eleanor? The librarian's face was troubled, her lips pressed into a thin line. I need to tell you something. Something I probably should have mentioned years ago, but I convinced myself it didn't matter. Cole felt a prickle of unease crawl up his spine. Go on. Do you remember Angela Morton? The name hit Cole like a physical blow. Angela Morton. He hadn't heard that name spoken aloud in 15 years. Not since the night she disappeared. She'd been 17, a senior at Ember Creek High. Popular and pretty and full of life. One March evening in 2009, she'd left her house to meet friends at the river. She never arrived. They'd searched for weeks, dragged the river when it thawed that spring, but they'd never found a trace of her. Eventually, the assumption became that she'd run away, escaped to a bigger city, a better life. Her parents had moved away the following year, unable to bear the memories. Of course I remember Angela, Cole said, his voice rough. What about her? 2 days before she disappeared, Eleanor said slowly. She came to the library. She was upset, shaking, said she needed to use the computer, needed to look something up. I asked if she was okay, and she said. Eleanor paused, her hands twisting together. She said she'd found something in the river, something old, something wrong. She wouldn't tell me what it was, said I'd think she was crazy. She spent 3 hours on that computer, researching local history, old news articles, and then she left. That was the last time I saw her. Cole's mind was racing. Why didn't you tell anyone this at the time? I did tell the sheriff then, Frank Calloway. He said Angela was probably just being dramatic, that teenage girls got worked up over nothing. He told me not to spread rumors. Eleanor's voice cracked. I should have pushed harder. I should have made more noise. But Frank was, well, you know how he was. And then he died of that heart attack a year later, and you took over, and by then it seemed too late. Too much time had passed. Eleanor, Cole said carefully, do you think there's a connection between Angela and Sarah? I don't know, the librarian whispered, but that river has always felt wrong to me, Sheriff. Even in summer when it's flowing and beautiful, there's something about it that makes my skin crawl. And now, with Sarah gone and that hole in the ice, she trailed off, shaking her head. I just thought you should know. The dive team arrived from Missoula at 3 p.m. 4 men in wetsuits who looked at the frozen river with professional skepticism. The lead diver, a grizzled man named Tom Hastings, stood with Cole on the riverbank as his team prepared their equipment. This is going to be tricky, Tom said, studying the hole in the ice. Water under ice is disorienting, easy to lose your bearings, and with the current, if there's a body down there, it could have been carried quite a ways downstream. How long can you search? Cole asked. We'll give it 3 hours before the light goes. If we don't find anything by then, We'll have to come back tomorrow. Cole watched as the divers entered the black water, their lights disappearing beneath the surface like stars winking out. Maya stood beside him, her arms crossed against the cold. I talked to about 30 people at the community center, she said. Nobody saw Sarah after 6 p.m. yesterday, but I did get one interesting piece of information. Jenny Holbrook, you know her, works at the diner? Cole nodded. Jenny was 19, had graduated high school the previous year, and decided to stay in Ember Creek rather than go to college, much to her parents' disappointment. Jenny said she was driving home from her shift yesterday around 6:30, and she saw someone standing on the riverbank right about here. She said it was too dark to make out details, but it looked like a man, tall, wearing a dark coat. She didn't think much of it at the time, figured it was someone ice fishing. But when I pressed her, she admitted something felt off about it, the way the person was just standing there, not moving, staring at the ice. Did she recognize them? No. And I showed her photos of every male resident in this town between the ages of 15 and 70. She couldn't identify anyone. Cole felt that cold weight in his stomach grow heavier. So we might have a stranger in town, or someone she didn't recognize in the dark and at a distance, Maya pointed out. But yeah, that's a possibility. They stood in silence for a long moment, watching the divers' lights move beneath the ice like ghostly fish. Then Tom's voice crackled over the radio. Sheriff! You better get down here. Cole and Maya scrambled down the embankment to the hole in the ice. Tom's head broke the surface, water streaming from his wetsuit. His face was pale beneath his tan. We found her, he said grimly. About 40 feet downstream. She's caught on something, lodged under the ice. Cole's chest tightened. Is it Sarah Kellerman? Can't tell yet. But Sheriff, Tom paused, his expression troubled. There's something else. There are chains, heavy chains, wrapped around the body. This wasn't an accident. Someone wanted to make sure she stayed down there. The recovery took another 2 hours. By the time they pulled Sarah Kellerman's body from the river, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of purple and crimson that seemed obscenely beautiful against the horror unfolding on the riverbank. Cole had seen dead bodies before. Of course he had, but something about this one hit differently. Maybe it was because he'd known Sarah, had watched her grow up, had seen her teaching kids at the elementary school just last week. Or maybe it was the chains, thick and rusted, wrapped around her torso and legs like serpents. Dr. Walter Harrison, Ember Creek's medical examiner and the town's only doctor, knelt beside the body, his examination careful and methodical. He was in his 70s, with trembling hands and kind eyes that had seen more than their share of death. But even he looked shaken. Preliminary cause of death appears to be drowning, he said, his voice subdued. But there are significant head wounds, blunt force trauma to the back of the skull. She was unconscious or dead before she entered the water. How long has she been in there? Maya asked. Hard to say with the cold water, but I'd estimate 12 to 18 hours. That would put time of death somewhere between 6 p.m. yesterday and midnight. Cole crouched down, studying the chains. They were old, the kind you might find in a barn or workshop, covered in rust and algae. These chains, any way to trace them? I'll examine them more closely at the morgue, Walter said. But honestly, Cole, chains like these, you can find them in half the garages in this town. Everyone's got old equipment lying around. As they loaded Sarah's body into the ambulance, Cole noticed something that made him pause. On Sarah's left wrist, barely visible beneath the chains, was a bracelet. Not jewelry, but a braided cord of some kind, faded and waterlogged. He pointed it out to Walter. That looked like something Sarah would wear? He asked. Walter frowned, examining it more closely. No, actually. Sarah was more of a gold and silver person. This looks homemade. Cheap craft supplies. Cole felt something click in his mind. He pulled out his phone, scrolling through photos until he found what he was looking for. It was an old case file, one he'd inherited when he became sheriff. A photo of Angela Morton, taken a week before she disappeared, and there, on her left wrist, was an identical braided cord bracelet. He showed the photo to Maya and Walter. They both went very still. That can't be a coincidence, Maya said quietly. No, Cole agreed, his voice grim. It can't. That night Cole sat in his office at the sheriff's station, a small building that smelled of coffee and old paperwork. The station was empty except for him and Maya. Outside, snow had begun to fall again, soft and silent, covering Ember Creek in a fresh layer of white innocence. It was almost midnight, and Cole's eyes burned with exhaustion, but he couldn't stop working, couldn't stop turning over the pieces of this puzzle in his mind. He'd pulled every file they had on Angela Morton, spread them across his desk like tarot cards promising dark futures. There wasn't much. Frank Calloway, the previous sheriff, hadn't been known for his thoroughness or attention to detail. Most of the investigation had been cursory at best, negligent at worst. Angela was written off as a runaway within a month of her disappearance, but now, Looking at the case with fresh eyes and new information, Cole saw patterns he'd missed before. Angela had been seen near the river the night she disappeared, just like Sarah. She'd been upset in the days leading up to her vanishing, just like Sarah, according to Jim. And now, this bracelet connection. Find anything? Maya asked, setting a fresh cup of coffee on his desk. She'd been in the records room, digging through old files. Not enough, Cole admitted, but I keep coming back to what Eleanor said. Angela found something in the river, something that scared her enough to spend 3 hours researching local history. So I went digging, Maya said, sitting down across from him. She had a stack of photocopied newspaper articles in her hands. Turns out, Ember Creek has a darker history than I realized. Way darker. She spread the articles on the desk. The oldest one was from 1952. Yellowed and brittle with age. The headline read, "Local mill owner dies in tragic accident. Edward Harrow," Maya said, pointing to the article. He owned the old lumber mill that used to operate here, back when Ember Creek was a thriving logging town. According to this, he drowned in the river in December of 1952. They found his body chained to his desk, which had been thrown into the water. The official ruling was suicide, but she pulled out another article, this one from 1953. 3 months later, his business partner, Thomas Riley, confessed on his deathbed to murdering Harrow. Turns out Harrow had discovered that Riley was embezzling from the mill. Riley killed him, weighted the body down, dumped it in the river. Okay, Cole said slowly. That's dark, but it was 70 years ago. What does it have to do with now? Maya pulled out more articles, arranging them in chronological order. In 1967, a woman named Patricia Mills drowned in the river. Accidental, they said. In 1983, Michael Chen, no relation to me, drowned, also ruled accidental. In 1994, Rebecca Stowe drowned. You see the pattern? Cole felt his skin prickle. Every 15 to 20 years or so, someone drowns in that river. And here's the really creepy part, Maya said, pulling out one final article, this one more recent. In 2009, the same year Angela disappeared, there was an article in the Ember Creek Gazette about the river. Some local historian was interviewed, talking about local legends and folklore. He mentioned that the Native Americans who originally lived in this area, the Salish people, considered this stretch of river to be cursed. They called it the place where spirits feed, and they believed that a malevolent entity lived in the water, something ancient and hungry that demanded periodic sacrifice. Cole sat back in his chair, his mind reeling. You're not suggesting that we're dealing with something supernatural? No, Maya said firmly. I'm suggesting that maybe someone in this town believes in this curse. Someone who's taken it upon themselves to keep the tradition alive. Someone who's been killing people and making it look like accidents or disappearances. Every 15 to 20 years for decades, the implication hung in the air between them. Heavy and terrible. A serial killer, Cole said. A serial killer who's been operating in Ember Creek for over 70 years. Or a series of killers, Maya countered. Maybe it's passed down like a family tradition. Father to son, generation to generation. Cole stood abruptly, pacing to the window. Outside, Ember Creek slept under its blanket of snow, peaceful and quiet. How many of his neighbors were killers? How many knew the truth and had kept silent all these years? We need to talk to Jim Kellerman again, he said finally, and we need to find out who made those bracelets. If Angela had one, and Sarah had one, there might be others. There might be more victims we don't know about. Cole, Maya said softly, if this theory is right, if there really is some kind of cult or family legacy at work here, then everyone in this town is a suspect. Everyone, I know, Cole said grimly. But we start with the people closest to the victims. We start with Jim. They found Jim Kellerman sitting in his darkened living room at 1 a.m., a bottle of whiskey on the coffee table, half empty. His brother Mike had gone home hours ago, and Jim sat alone in the shadows, his eyes red-rimmed and hollow. When Cole and Maya knocked, he didn't seem surprised to see them. He just opened the door and stepped aside, letting them in without a word. The Kellerman house was small and tidy, filled with the kind of personal touches that spoke of a happy marriage, photos on the walls, Sarah's teaching awards displayed on the mantel, a half-finished jigsaw puzzle on the dining room table. It made everything worse, somehow. These were the artifacts of a life interrupted, a future stolen. Jim, Cole said gently, I know this is an impossible time, but we need to ask you some questions. Jim nodded mutely, sinking back into his chair. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in the past 24 hours. Did Sarah seem worried about anything lately? Maya asked, sitting across from him. Was she acting differently? Jim was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with grief and whiskey. She'd been having nightmares. Started about a month ago. She'd wake up in the middle of the night, terrified, talking about drowning, about being trapped under the ice. I told her to see someone, maybe talk to a therapist, but she said it was just stress. The holidays coming up. Busy time at school. She said it would pass. Did she mention anything about the river specifically? Cole pressed. Yeah, actually. She said she kept dreaming about the river, about something calling to her from beneath the ice. Said it felt like a memory, not a dream, but she couldn't remember actually experiencing it. Jim looked up at them, his eyes desperate. Do you think she was having some kind of premonition? Like she knew what was going to happen? I don't know, Cole said honestly. Jim, do you recognize this? He showed him the photo of Angela Morton wearing the braided bracelet. Jim squinted at the photo, then his face went pale. Yeah, I do. Sarah had one just like it. I asked her about it once months ago, and she said she didn't know where it came from. Said she'd found it in her coat pocket one day. She thought maybe one of her students had made it for her and she'd forgotten. She liked it, wore it sometimes. Is this important? We think it might be, Maya said. We found an identical bracelet on Sarah's body, and Angela Morton, a girl who disappeared 15 years ago, had one too. Jim's hands began to shake. What are you saying? What does this mean? It means, Cole said carefully, that whoever killed Sarah might have been planning this for a long time. These bracelets might be some kind of marker, a way to identify intended victims. But why? Jim's voice broke. Why Sarah? She was a teacher, for God's sake. She helped kids. She never hurt anyone. We don't know yet, Cole admitted, but we're going to find out. I promise you, Jim, we will find out who did this. As they left the Kellerman house, stepping back out into the frozen night, Maya turned to Cole. He genuinely didn't know about the bracelet's significance. I believe him. So do I, Cole said, which means our killer is someone else. Someone who's been watching Sarah, who got close enough to plant that bracelet on her without her noticing. They drove back through the empty streets of Ember Creek, the town's few streetlights casting pools of yellow light on the snow. Cole found himself looking at the houses they passed, wondering which one sheltered a murderer. Was it Marcus Webb, with his aggressive manner and his hardware store full of chains and tools? Was it Peter Novak, who'd seemed so eager to report Sarah's disappearance? Was it even someone they'd never suspect? Someone trusted and beloved? We need to check on something, Cole said suddenly, pulling the car to a stop in front of the town library. It's 1:30 in the morning, Maya pointed out. The library's been closed for hours, I know, but Eleanor Vance lives in the apartment above it. And if Angela was researching something before she disappeared, maybe Eleanor remembers more than she told us. They climbed the exterior stairs to Eleanor's apartment, and Cole knocked firmly on the door. After a moment, a light flickered on inside, and Eleanor appeared, wrapped in a bathrobe, her silver hair loose around her shoulders. Sheriff? She said, squinting at them. What's wrong? I'm sorry to bother you so late, Cole said, but I need you to think back to when Angela Morton came to the library. You said she was researching local history. Do you remember what specifically she was looking at? Eleanor frowned, thinking. Old newspapers mostly, the Ember Creek Gazette archives. We have them on microfilm going back to the 1920s. She was focused on the 1950s. I remember that, and she kept searching for the same name, Edward Harrow. Cole and Maya exchanged glances. The mill owner who was murdered, Maya said. Did she say why she was interested in him? Cole asked. No, but Eleanor paused, her eyes distant with memory. She printed something. One page. I saw it briefly when she was gathering her things. It was a photo from the newspaper, from Harrow's funeral. A crowd shot, lots of people gathered at the cemetery. Angela was staring at it like she'd seen a ghost. Do you still have the library's print logs from back then? Maya asked. Everything's computerized now, but the old logs might still be in storage. Give me a moment. Eleanor disappeared back into her apartment, returning a few minutes later with a dusty ledger. She flipped through the pages, running her finger down columns of dates. Here, March 15th, 2009, 2 days before Angela disappeared. One print job, from microfilm reel 17, frame 43. Can we access that reel now? Cole asked. The library's closed, but Eleanor looked between them, reading the urgency in their faces. All right, come on. They followed her down to the library, Eleanor unlocking the door with shaking hands. The building was dark and cold, smelling of old books and dust. Eleanor led them to the back room where the microfilm machines sat, relics from an analog age. She found reel 17, loaded it, and fast-forwarded to frame 43. The image that appeared on the screen was grainy and black and white, a photograph from January 1953. It showed a large crowd gathered at Ember Creek Cemetery for Edward Harrow's funeral. In the foreground, standing by the grave, were several prominent town figures from that era. But Eleanor zoomed in on the background, on a cluster of younger men standing apart from the main group. "Oh my God," Maya whispered. One of the men was barely more than a teenager, thin and sharp-featured, but his face was unmistakable, even across 7 decades. The same high cheekbones, the same deep-set eyes, the same thin lips. Cole felt the room spin around him. It was Marcus Webb, or rather, someone who looked exactly like Marcus Webb would have looked at 18. "That can't be Marcus," Eleanor said, her voice shaking. "Marcus is only 56. He would have been negative 14 years old when this photo was taken." "His grandfather," Cole said, his mind racing. "Or great-grandfather." "Maya, what was Marcus's family history? Do you remember?" Maya pulled out her phone, fingers flying over the screen. "The Webbs have been in Ember Creek since the 1920s. Marcus's great-grandfather was, oh Jesus, Samuel Webb. He worked at Harrow's mill. He was questioned during the murder investigation because he was one of the last people to see Harrow alive, but he had an alibi. He died in 1989. What about his son, Marcus's grandfather? Daniel Webb, born 1935, died 2001. And then there's Marcus's father, Robert Webb, born 1959, died in 2015. Maya's face had gone pale. "Cole, look at the dates. Samuel died in 89, just 6 years after Michael Chen drowned in 1983. Robert died in 2015. Just 6 years after Angela disappeared in 2009. And now Marcus is the right age to continue the tradition," Cole finished grimly. 3 generations of Webbs, each one carrying on the killing, each one choosing a victim, marking them with a bracelet, and sacrificing them to whatever twisted belief they hold. "But why?" Eleanor asked, her voice anguished. "Why would they do this?" Cole thought back to the article Maya had found about the Native American legend of the cursed river. "Because they believe it's necessary. They believe that if they don't feed the river, something terrible will happen to Ember Creek. It's insane, but that's the logic of it. And it's been going on so long that it's become their truth, passed down from father to son like a dark inheritance." "We need to arrest Marcus," Maya said urgently. "Now, before he realizes we're onto him." But Cole was already shaking his head, staring at the photograph on the screen. Something was nagging at him. Something important. "Wait, look at this photo again. Samuel Webb isn't alone. There are 3 other men standing with him, all young, all looking at the camera with the same strange intensity. What if it's not just one family? What if there are multiple families involved, a whole group maintaining this tradition?" Maya zoomed in on the other faces. They were harder to identify, the image degraded by age and poor quality. But one of them, Cole realized with a jolt, had the same basic features as Peter Novak. And another looked suspiciously like a younger version of the face that stared out from old photos in the library. Photos of William Vance, Eleanor's late husband. "No," Eleanor breathed, seeing where his eyes had landed. "No, William would never. He was a good man." "I'm sorry, Eleanor," Cole said gently, "but we have to follow the evidence." He turned to Maya. "We need to move carefully here. If there really is a group involved, and they realize we're onto them, they could scatter or destroy evidence. We need warrants. We need backup from the state police, and we need to move fast." "I'll start making calls," Maya said, already heading for the door. Cole remained with Eleanor, who had sunk into a chair, her face buried in her hands. He wanted to comfort her, wanted to say something that would make this less awful, but there were no words for a betrayal this profound. "I never knew," Eleanor whispered. "All those years, sleeping next to him, sharing my life with him, and I never knew he was a murderer." "Sometimes," Cole said quietly, "the people we think we know are strangers wearing familiar faces." The next 12 hours were a blur of warrants, arrests, and revelations that shook Ember Creek to its core. With backup from the state police, Cole and Maya moved simultaneously on Marcus Webb, Peter Novak, and 2 other men whose families had been in Ember Creek for generations. They found evidence in all their homes. Old journals detailing the ritual, maps of the river marked with locations, and in Marcus Webb's garage, chains identical to those used to drown Sarah Kellerman. But the most damning evidence came from Peter Novak's basement. There, hidden behind a false wall, they found a shrine. Dozens of braided cord bracelets hung on hooks, each one labeled with a name and date. Angela Morton, 2009. Rebecca Stowe, 1994. Michael Chen, 1983. The list went back decades, a roster of the dead stretching all the way to 1952 and Edward Harrow himself. And at the end, the most recent additions. Sarah Kellerman, 2024. And one more, freshly made, the tag still blank. The next victim, already chosen, but not yet taken. "They were planning another one," Maya said, her voice hollow. "Even after Sarah, they were going to kill again." During interrogation, Marcus Webb was defiant at first, insisting they were protecting the town, that the sacrifices were necessary to keep Ember Creek safe from the curse. But as the hours wore on and the weight of evidence mounted, his story began to shift. He blamed his father, said he'd been raised believing this was his sacred duty, that the burden had been passed to him against his will. He claimed he'd wanted to stop, but the fear of breaking the tradition was too great. Peter Novak broke faster, confessing everything through tears. He named names, gave up the locations of bodies that had never been found, including Angela Morton's remains, buried in a shallow grave in the woods outside town. By sunset, 4 men were in custody, their families destroyed, their legacy one of horror rather than the twisted honor they'd imagined. Cole sat in his office that evening, exhausted down to his bones. The snow had stopped falling, and stars glittered in the clear night sky, cold and distant.